Welcome everyone to Retro Chat, episode number 3. Andy here, and we are going to be talking this week about one of the greatest cartoons ever produced in the 1980s, and that is, of course, Transformers. But I can't do it on my own. Please welcome my guest at this time, the gentleman that led... Nah, not getting that far yet. Please welcome Mr. DB himself, Dan Barnsdall. Welcome to the show, my old friend.
Andy, it's great to be here. Can I say, though, from a hosting point of view, I'll give you a few pointers on introductions, because that was god-awful. And I'm glad about that, because being a trained MC, I hate competition. So you maybe need to think about how you introduce people to get it right for this huge show, which is Retro Trapped. And it's great to be here. And you know what? I've listened to a couple of other shows. I've really enjoyed the ones you've done so far, so I'm very happy and humbled to be here, sir.
Did you just call the show Retro Crap or Retro Chat?
Retro Chat.
It sounded like Retro Crap.
Retro Chat. You can work that out in the edit, though, if you want to.
No.
Mate, it could be retro crap. I haven't seen any reviews on iTunes. You tell me.
Well, if you want to leave me a review, you can do on iTunes. 5 stars. That helps us go up the rankings, get the guests like Mr. DB, and, really kind of take the show to the next level. But for those of you, for those of you who kind of wonder why Dan and I have got this sort of banter back and forth, it's because I've known Dan since 2008.
As a host, I would have hoped you had done your research. Yeah, it's around about then, to be honest.
It was 2008, wasn't it?
It was indeed, yeah. It was funny enough, without boring people, because I'm sure that's not what people want to hear, but you are part of the reason that I originally even got into any kind of broadcasting or podcasting of any kind, because when I think it was 2007, 2008, I got an iPod for the very first time. You know, I don't know. To be clear here, I have always been way behind the times. Always been behind the times. You know, like I've only just recently got an iPhone, like in the last couple of years. You know, that's how far behind I've been with stuff. So I got this this iPod, and it took me, I think, a year to discover that you could actually have podcasts on it. And I had no idea these podcasts existed. So I just was sat at home, thought, the podcast, what's that? Kind of looked it up and just thought, I'm a big wrestling fan. Punched in wrestling, and the normal ones came up, and I punched in, I think, UK wrestling. And the first one that actually appeared, or one of the first ones that appeared, was now is still the Ministry of Slam. And kind of started listening to it on podcasts and started listening live. And obviously that's where you were hosting it, or everyone, one of the hosts. And through that, as you do, through this wrestling world, kind of added you on Facebook and got chatting from that point of view. And I think we actually met face-to-face at a show. I want to say a premiere promotion show in Bournemouth, I think it might have been. 2008, maybe 2009. It was summer season, August 2008, and it was
I think the big draw they had then was Billy Gunn, and Billy Gunn no-showed the event, if I remember right.
No, he was there.
Was he there? But it was definitely Billy Gunn, and he was in the main event.
I've definitely seen him at the Bournemouth, whether it was that show or not, but because there was comments made afterwards about whether he was in the right state to wrestle, shall we say. I don't know about the same event as you went to. I did go to another event there where he wasn't available, and D'Lo Brown turned up instead. That's the one I went to there. But no, I've actually got a photo of you from that event when we first met. So so not something I don't think a lot of people know about, but without discovering the Ministry of Slam and talking to you, probably we wouldn't be even sat here now, realistically, or I wouldn't be anyway.
But it's not just that. I mean, this podcast is something like a love affair to me, and it's really not, because the last 2 guests that we've had on have also, where you've made some sort of impact and got me into podcasting. I was just doing my job. That's what I was here for. But it was great when you strike up these friendships with people, and they become their listeners, and then you meet them at an event, and you always kind of go, oh, you're a little bit stalkerish if you're a listener, and then what you know as well as I do.
You know what?
You know as well as I do.
I look back now. I look back now to think about that when I first kind of met yourself, and I kind of think, oh Christ, was I like that? Because with all due respect, I do mean this, all due respect. I've done podcasting now in different forms for about 8 years, a bit longer than that, no, about 10 years, and you do meet listeners, and you can be a small podcast to a decent sized podcast. You meet listeners, they come up to you, and they want to talk to you, and that is great. And I can say I can only speak for myself, but from a host point of view, it means you're getting interaction, which then clicks from your point of view. Oh, people are actually listening. Great. Happy days. Yeah. But sometimes they come up to you and they are like super clingy, and it's really nice. It shows you've made an impact in their life. But then from my point of view, I then sometimes walk away and think, Christ, was I like that with certain people I've met? And it's something that's just stuck with me for a long time now, that when I meet someone, and it's whether it is within, and then predominantly for myself, it's within the wrestling business. When I meet someone within the wrestling business, even if I am a fan, I try so hard not to be that guy. Yeah. But at the same time, I equally understand why it is so hard for fans when they get so excited seeing you. It's one of this kind of double-edged sword. You want people to be excited about you, but you don't want to be that guy yourself as well at the same time.
But also on our side of the table, when you're actually hosting the show and you get the people coming up, you don't want to be that guy that dismisses them, left, right, and center. Because you and I not only have done the podcast together, we've worked for the same wrestling promotion before now. You as an MC and me as a commentator / on-air talent. And you do get people coming up afterwards who, in the realms of professional wrestling, which is not what we're here to talk about, that genuinely believe it's real. And you know as well as I do, when you're the most hated character on the card, or one of the most hated characters, all they want to do is kill you, and that can be a little bit disconcerting. Actually, go, no, I'm just a guy here doing a job and getting paid for it and walking away.
It does. So, I mean, I've literally been in both situations. So I've been lucky enough to be predominantly an MC or referee, but I've also worked in a small experience as a manager, as that dastardly guy that everyone wants to boo and yell at. And equally, I have been cornered after a show, saying, you shouldn't have that, you shouldn't have this. And it's, again, walking that fine line. You want to keep in character. You want to keep the fans. I don't think we're breaking any kind of fourth wall in wrestling that it is predetermined up to a point. And you've got to try and keep it as neutral as possible to keep these fans interested. Because bottom line is, they're coming back. They're the ones that pay the money. They buy the merchandise. They cheer. They boo, which is what we want them to do. From any point of view in the wrestling business you want those fans to be vocal. And you've got to keep it going up. But equally, I've been cornered as a referee after a match saying, you didn't call that right. Why did you let that guy get the win and all that kind of stuff? And that's what I love about fans. I think there is like this sense of disbelief. They can turn this disbelief off and go, this is real. This is what's going on. And it's a great thing from a fan's point of view. And it's similar to kind of a little bit what we're going to talk about today with regards to Transformers and that kind of stuff. That's a very bad kind of segue.
Yeah, absolutely. But before we do that, let's just give some contact details, and then we'll talk a bit more about you and your love of Transformers. So if you would like to get in contact with me on the show or with the show in general, you can do it by various means. You can head to the website, which is retrochat.co.uk, or you can join us on our socials. And that's Facebook, Instagram, and the new Discord server, which we're still trying to set up because I'm not technically inclined and I don't know what I'm doing. It's the Retro Chat podcast on all of those. Plus, we are on Twitch. And if you want to see me playing some video games very badly, then you can do by joining.
You're god awful at video games.
Hang on, have you seen the Twitch?
I'm not. Do you know? I'm not going to lie. I haven't, purely because yet again, Dan has only recently discovered Instagram, so I am way behind with everything. But no, I am. I've played you at games, and I've seen your quality. You are. Hey, what I'm trying to say is check him out on Twitch because it'll be funny if nothing else.
Hey, I'm good at the wrestling games. All right, I'm just okay. I'm not. I was playing. There's a video on there which I think is still up, and I was playing a little bit of Batman Arkham Knight on the PS4, and it was live streaming it, and I had a 13-year-old comment on me going, "Wow, that was sad." Okay, I'm not doing this anymore.
No, we're going to go on some tangents here, and I'm not going to apologise because that's part of what makes a good podcast. I think.
I probably do.
I have played Arkham Asylum.
Yeah.
Which was the first one? Asylum, I'm guessing, was the first one, wasn't it?
Arkham Asylum was the first one.
And one of the reasons I got it because I remember you raving about it, and your other former host Jason raving about it as well. I was like, I'm a bit of a Batman fan. I like Batman. It's cool. It's fun. I thought, give it a go. I was bored. So bored. I could do it. I just thought it just for me just felt really repetitive and it felt really restricted what you could do. I got very, very bored, and I just took it back. I sold it in the end.
Well, the other two games are much better. So Arkham City and Arkham Knight, much better in some of those, much more open world. But that is really off tangent. We obviously did TWS together, the Total Wrestling Show, after I left ministry. So your first foray into proper podcasting. How have you found the transition from a fan of a product to a podcaster to then going into the business?
It's a really good question, actually.
You weren't prepared for this, by the way. You thought we were just talking.
I'm open book with my stuff. It was fun, and it is fun. You know, I did a podcast with Carl Atlas. For those in the wrestling world, check out the Beards podcast a couple of weeks ago. I'm a regular on there as their kind of like pundit, I suppose, from their point of view. And we talked now. Carl actually was the one who actually got me into the wrestling business with regards to actually booking me for the first time to be an MC. So yeah, it started off with being a fan, listening to ministry, starting with TWS with yourself and Steve, and then moving into announcing, refereeing, managing on actual wrestling shows. And it is weird. The transition is weird, and it's very hard to make that transition. I think some people want to, especially people in podcasting and cover wrestling, they would love to be involved more backstage. Not necessarily wrestling, although I think a lot of podcasters would like to think they could wrestle, and I've never wanted to wrestle. Never. Don't want to do it. My threshold of pain is way too low. Couldn't do it.
Don't do it.
And I just think it's been a real unique journey for me over 8 years. I've been very lucky, and I'm very grateful to the doors that have been open. And a lot of the doors were open through podcasting, through TWS, through getting in the door of chatting to promoters about promoting their shows, and in turn turning up at their shows and just being open to do anything. And I got a lot of support, being an MC, and really, I suppose I started being an MC for Carl, like Power Wrestling. I then stopped for about 8 months, and the only reason I got back into it again because I had to cover for yourself.
You did.
Ultimate Pro Wrestling, when you had a family emergency, so you had to go off, and Mark said to me, "Would you step in?" And I was like, "I haven't done it for a while. I didn't even have my gear on me. I was in like a waistcoat and jeans, and I did the show, and then from there I became the MC of Ultimate Pro Wrestling. I became Socks." And then from there, some of the doors open up. Whether it's been Red Pro, WrestleForce, LDN, WAW, Impact Wrestling have booked me. It's been just this kind of almost this whirlwind of stuff from then appearing on TV, for the Red Pro TV show for 2.5 months every week. It was just an amazing, amazing journey. And obviously with COVID, it's become a bit of a grinding hole.
But you're getting back out there again because I know UPW have got a show coming up in August. Is that right?
Yeah, great. It's great to hear. I won't bore people, but there are bookings. I've got bookings out there for UPW, through LDN, through WrestleForce, through CSF, and also through on a bit of a tangent again. I also work for the UK's #1 business motivational speaker, Brad Burton. Check him out on Facebook and all social medias. And yeah, I work for him, and I'm working the Aston Villa Football Club again for him in October, which I'm really excited about.
Are you worried about getting back out there in light of COVID and the variants, etc.?
So I've had my first jab a couple of weeks ago, and I've got the second one booked in. I'm worried. It's funny. I went out this weekend on a Friday night for the first time in, it must be 18 months, but if not longer. Went to a pub, went on a bit of a pub crawl with the wife, and just it was in one pub especially. It was like, wow, there is no lockdown. You know, there was people wandering around with masks on. Everyone was in each other's face, and it was actually quite a sobering thought. You sat there going, and you felt a little bit. This is no disrespect to the pub because it could be in any pub, but I felt a little bit unsafe. I felt a little bit like, you know, should we be out? But equally, you've got to get on with it now. We just got to get out there and get out. We've got to start believing in these vaccinations and doing, but still doing our due diligence. Absolutely, you know, wearing masks, social distancing, washing your hands, all that kind of good stuff. But getting in the ring, I think my first booking is late July. And I know the promoter, and the promoter has told me that if the place is going to be, you know, cleaned, there's going to be masks worn, social distancing is going to be in place. I think he's even talking about doing checks beforehand, at least with the talent, you know, from that point of view, which I think is great. That gives you a bit more solace. But no, I think anyone who's going back out there, and especially in the wrestling business, when you're pretty much grabbing each other, you know, in close proximity, you can't social distance in wrestling, even from a fan's point of view. I think you've got to be a little bit concerned, but equally, you've got to trust the science. You've got to believe what people are saying, what the government's saying with regards to the vaccinations, and that we can beat this. And you've just got to go forward at some point. At some point, we've got to go forward, haven't we?
Life's got to go back to normal at some point, hey?
Yes.
You know, regardless of what stage. This isn't a podcast. You should be coming on the HR show if we want to talk more about COVID. You know, that's a completely different kettle of fish. But let's do it. Let's talk about why we're here. Let's talk about Transformers, okay? Because you've been a lifelong fan of the cartoon that went back to the 80s with Generation 1, followed by the Headmasters, which we never got to see over here in the UK. But have you ever seen the dubbed version of Headmasters?
Yeah, I've seen the majority of them. So yeah, Headmasters actually was. I loved the Headmasters toys. Headmasters, Target Masters, Power Masters. I think some fans, and I say don't like them that much. I love them. I love the intricate smaller figures, whether they were the Target Master, the Headmaster, or the Power Master that came with them, the Nebulans or whatever you thought they were, the Cybertronian partners. I love them. I thought they were great. I thought they were a great toy to have. You know, when I got them, I thought they were wonderful. But for a lot of people, they were almost like the beginning of the end, especially with G1. You know, that's when people's fandom kind of dropped off a little bit, and they're not thought of that well. And if you look at the toys, you know, and I'm not a toy collector, in all honesty. I wish I was, because if I had some of the ones I had when I was a kid, probably be a lot better off financially, because they are worth an absolute packet now. But yeah, if you look at the toys in comparison, they look like so basic in comparison to what we probably remember them as were as a kid. You know, that rose tinted glasses. They were great. Looking back at them now, they are a bit basic.
But the scary thing is, the toys that we had when Generation 1 first came out, you know, the Prime, the Megatron, all that type of thing, were literally a rip-off of a Japanese toy. I can't remember the name of now, but it was a rip-off of a Japanese constructor toy that they did.
So originally, if you go back in history with regards to Transformers, it goes right the way back to the Japanese Henson Cyborg Man, as they used to call it. And that is going way, way back. It really started in 1980 with Transformers as a lore, where it was originally a Japanese company called Diaclone that made. Basically, all you see is what we know is the original Transformers. So the G1, as it's called within the fandom, the original model. So like your Optimus Prime, your Megatron, your Soundwaves, your Sideswipes. I only say Sideswipe because that's one of the first ones I ever had. But they are the ones that people remember. They were actually was two companies kind of merging into one. So 1980 was 1982, sorry, was Diaclone, and that was predominantly their car robo line, which was people like Optimus Prime and that kind of side of it. And then in 1983, there was Micro Change line, which was the smaller ones. We say smaller, they weren't. It was your Soundwaves, it was your Megatrons, the cassettes, and the mini cars, so like your Bumblebees, your Cliff Jumpers, your Brawns, those kind of models. And they were brought together by Takara and licensed to Hasbro to make this kind of huge new wave of toys. And it really came down to someone probably that you remember. You know, so the name they came up to was Transformers, but linking into one of your old kind of podcasts, it was Marvel that gave these Transformers the life, that gave them the characters, you know, from then. And Marvel Comics came up with the storylines for them.
They did, and I think if my research is right, the lead writer, the guy who came up with the Bible for Transformers, had 24 hours to create the entire catalog, and they came up with the name of Prime, Megatron, Soundwave, Blaster, all that type of thing in 24 hours. And I think what you've got to think of is, I mean, you're the expert.
No. Let's be clear. I am not an expert. I'm a fan.
You're a fan, but you're really
you
not.
Have people commenting going, I'll have a sound now. It was actually 1983, December 24th, or something like that in your comments. But no, I'm a fan, and I've done my research. I followed it for 42 of my years. And it's something I like. I'm a bit passionate about. Yeah.
We don't go into that much detail on here, so we're not going to turn around and say the 11th hour on the 23rd of December. We don't do that. I'm just lucky you've done some research. But you see, what I was going to go with here in the 80s was all about that cartoon toy line relationship. So if you think about the Thundercats, if you think about He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, if you think about Transformers, yeah. And even to a degree, My Little Pony and G.I. Joe, it was all about, we've got the toy line, now what can we do to get the franchise out there? And the Saturday morning cartoon came about. What led to its downfall? Because we know that it ran for 4 seasons. It had the cinematic movie release, which we're going to talk about in a second. Why did it die? What was the reason for it, in your opinion?
There is numerous opinions out there. I think the bottom line is it came down to finances. They lost kind of interest of the children that grew up. And basically, when you think about it, they started coming out over here in 1984. It was launched. It was launched literally just after the GoBots were launched.
Yes,
GoBots beat them to the start line, so to speak. We can talk a bit about GoBots in a bit, but we grew up with Transformers. So I was when 1984 when they first came out, I was 5. So as I grew up and as my generation grew up, well, it's your generation as well. You can smirk all you want, Andy. It's your generation as well, mate.
I just love the fact you said I was 5, I was 3.
There you go. So we're not.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of difference, but I think as the generation change, the new generation comes in behind us, and they want something different. And Transformers didn't necessarily, in my opinion, anyway, change enough. It changed too dramatically. The end of the G1 is known as the Action Master phase, which was Transformers that don't transform.
Yeah. And
that killed it. And that was, and it was even brought into some of the comics. I was a huge fan of the Marvel comics, which Transformers released, which were big over here in the UK and the States. And it kind of killed all the kind of the interest off, because the idea of a Transformer from a kid's point of view is you can change it. You can transform it without stating the obvious, whether it's a vehicle or a Dinobot or a plane or whatever, into a robot, or in some cases, 7 different forms. And when you just basically get a model which has some articulation, which didn't really do anything, and then especially when you comparison to like other toys that were out there which have much more articulation, you're like, this is pretty pants.
I suppose what you got to think about is at that point, what differentiated the toy line from that of He-Man or the LGN WWF figures that were out at the time, or
very little.
Thundercats,
But I would say, if anything, like your wrestling figures, your Thundercats, they probably had more play moves, if that makes sense, than the Action Masters did. And it was a very, very short-lived kind of reign of the Action Masters, and the plug was pulled. And I say, not going to the ins and outs of finance and stuff, but the finances fell out of the floor as well. And then they brought it back with G2, where they revamped some of the toys, gave the toys new colours. So a lot of the toys were similar. Megatron got a bit of a revamp from a gun, because obviously you can't be selling guns anymore, into a tank. And for me, at that point, I lost all interest. I lost interest in it. I think my age had kind of grown up. My father was telling me, you cannot play with toys anymore. So, my toys are taken away from me. True story. And yes, and looking back now, if I had even those toys in the loft somewhere, they'd be worth an absolute fortune. And then you get into the Beast Wars segment of Transformers, which for me couldn't get into.
No.
Well, it's interesting because a lot of fans love Beast Wars. I think it's almost the second coming of G1, and I do not understand it. Don't get it. The toys looked crap, in my opinion. The characters weren't, and the cartoons were god awful. But again, that's because I think I grew up through the G1. I remember being on TV every Saturday morning. I remember sitting and watching it on with Timmy Mallet. and desperate for it to come on, sending pictures. And when you could draw pictures, that thing that kids read, draw a picture and send it in, and it'll be on Timmy Mallett's wall. I did that. Never got it on the wall, but I sent one in.
Wow. I never knew that. You kept that quiet for 11 years.
Didn't get on the wall, probably because it was crap. But I did go touring. But I remember sat there waiting for Transformers to come on, and it's part of my Saturday morning and in half term and summer holidays, my first thing in the morning routine.
Do you remember, in the weekdays in the summer holidays at like 9:25 when TVAM would go off, you used to either have He-Man, the New Adventures, or the Transformers.
Yep.
Kind of like kicking in, and that would be it. Then Saved by the Bell, then something different. That used to be your entire morning. Kids don't know what they're missing these days. But you talk about Beast Wars. I think one of the things that really went against that was the animation. So the cartoon that they had was traditional 80s animation, the hand-drawn, quite ahead of its time at that point. Beast Wars went CGI, which, again, was pretty much what they were trying to do. It was trying to revolutionize and be ahead of the time. But you lost that connection, I think, with the cartoon and the characters because it was that.
At the time, it was. You're absolutely right. But especially with Beast Wars, it was all computerized. It looked, great in comparison to now. You look back now, you think, God, that looks god awful in comparison to what we look like. I mean, example again, a bit of a tangent, but I thought, again, showing how far behind the times I am. I finally got and watched the Into the Spider-Verse.
Yes.
Is it Miles Morales? I think. Yeah. And that animation was crazy. And you put that up against Beast Wars. Without saying obvious, there is no comparison. But, the original G1 was cartoon. It was great. But again, if you look at it now, a lot of animation errors. Crazy amount of animation errors in there. You had Autobots and Decepticons on the same side. You had people who had died in the movie, which I'm sure we'll talk about, now back alive again, just standing there in the background. You had combined, stood in the background with the rest of their team, which makes no sense. It was... But that's also part of the love of Transformers.
That's it. And as a kid, that's it. As a kid, you don't sit there and pick up on that. As an adult, what I found, I mean, we'll talk about father to son in a minute, because obviously, you've got a dad, you've got a nearly 18-year-old son now, but
nearly 17. Let's not get carried away yet.
Hey, I'm trying to make you feel older than what you are, mate. I think when you watch it as a kid, you're blown away, really. You're kind of roped into the story. It's your imagination runs wild. I've watched Transformers back quite a few times since the cartoon finished, and there's nods in there that I think adults pick up on. It's like some of the adult humor that goes under the radar.
I think that's one of the bonuses of a lot of cartoons, especially the retro ones. And this is obviously what your show covers. Yeah. But you look back and watch a lot of them, and you think, they probably couldn't get away with saying that nowadays. And I include Transformers in that. I include that's like He-Man. I'm trying to think of other ones, G.I. Joe, all that kind of stuff from back in the day. Which it's great to go back and watch. And some of it, let's call a spade here. Great. This is a retro chat podcast. Some of it does not age well. And sometimes you sit there and you're watching, you're going, and I'll go back to Transformers. I would throw out all of season 3 in that, because you sit back and you watch it, and I'm sat there going, what the hell am I watching?
Well, season 3 and season 4, because it was a combined release. Season 4, which was literally the 3-part Headmasters episode. That was it. Season 3 that came off, that was what you would call the rebirth of the Transformers following the movie with Rodimus Prime, who never got over. That stupid 5-part episode they did about the virus that was infecting all of the Transformers, and then they had to get together again. And then the return of Optimus Prime, less than 6 months after they killed him off. It was just...
I mean, that was the hugest, biggest part. When everyone talks about Transformers, whether you're a fan or not, I think everyone talks about the fact that they killed off Optimus Prime. The guy who was in Transformers when it was back in Diaclone days. Originally it was going to be called, original name was Battle Convoy. Yeah. And they changed it to Optimus Prime, and voiced by the legendary Peter Cullen, doing the great voice, and he was killed off which was the middle of season. Well, between season 2 and season 3, they released the movie, which I went to the cinema to see. I remember.
So did I.
Distinctly, it was for a friend's birthday party. I want to say Robert Beeson, if you're watching this, I'm pretty sure it was your birthday party. It was about 6 of us. Your mum took us, and we all went to watch Transformers the movie at the cinema. And I wasn't spoiled at all, but this was back before we had internet and that kind of stuff. No idea Optimus Prime was going to be there, and I just remember this hush falling over the cinema, and everyone going, "Oh my god!" And then literally, one of the blokes who was with us had just got Optimus Prime as a toy. It was like, my toy's gone. So yeah, it was.
Oh my god!
It was such a moment, and it had ripples throughout. Obviously, Transformers, but it also affected other cartoons like G.I. Joe. Rechanged their movie. I'm sure it was their movie they were going to do into the way they actually didn't kill. Is it Duke? I believe they didn't kill Duke.
Yeah, they were going to kill off Duke, and for all intents and purposes, he was dead. But in the last, and you could see the change in the animation. You could see where they've cut it and they re-edited it to put in the new thing. Duke miraculously comes alive again.
He goes into a coma, doesn't he? I believe, and comes back.
Goes into a coma, which was meant to symbol. That was meant to be the death at that point. And then miraculously, you get this audio message come through saying Duke's going to be A-okay. Yo, Joe.
Which is great. It's interesting because if you look at Transformers, went across the board, they got rid of that movie. One of the main focuses on the movie was they had to kill off, I forget the number, X number of Transformers.
Yeah.
They removed them from next. They were no longer making their toys. So instead of just fading away, they were like, let's kill these guys. Let's brutalize.
How could you fade out Optimus Prime without killing him off? And Megatron as well. That was the.
I mean, listen, for me, and I say, I was even from day one, I was always a huge Decepticon fan. Always was. I had more Decepticons than I had Autobots. My first big Transformer I remember getting as a Christmas present was Megatron. I remember thinking, this is so cool. It's a gun for a start.
Yeah.
Very realistic looking gun. It's one of the reasons they can't
do it anymore.
But I had that, and I remember killing Megatron off, and I was more shocked by that because Starscream finally got his way in the movie. Starscream, for those of you who haven't watched it, go and watch it for a start. Starscream was Megatron's sort of second in command, who had always been trying throughout the first 2 seasons to get rid of Megatron in one form or another. They tried different ways of doing it. He was always kind of trying to stab Megatron in the back. And then Megatron is so badly injured that Starscream actually manages to basically get rid of him. He throws him out of a space shuttle, thinking he's dead, thinking he will then take charge of the Decepticons. And then this amazing scene with Unicron, the planet, which voiced by Orson Welles, and changed him into Galvatron. And ironically enough, I got Galvatron the Christmas after.
Oh, really?
As a Christmas present. Again, my main Christmas present was Galvatron. And I remember I was so happy with him. But interesting enough, unlike a lot of Transformers, his toy was made after the film. So a lot of the times, it's in the early days, the Transformers toys were made, and then the cartoon or comics would have to draw them. So especially if you look at the comics, the early comics, especially I think the comics 1 to 5, a lot of Transformers look like the toys, which basically means they look crap. Basically, look at like Ratchet and Ironhide being a great example. They've got no heads, basically these big kind of metal springs, and it was so a lot of the time the toys came first, and the cartoon and the comics drew around them and edited them. With regards to kind of the next season, people like your Scourges, your Galvatron, the Cyclonuses, they came from the cartoon. Blur being another great example. Cut, a great example. RT, yeah. So they came and the cartoon came first, and then they're like, go make toys for these things. I'm like, and then and that's why the Galvatron's a great example. It looks nothing like his cartoon. In fact, the cartoon looks much cooler. The toy looks pretty crap.
Let's just talk about Galvatron for a minute, because we'll touch on it in a second. You mentioned the transformation scene with Unicron, where he turned him into basically his subordinate, voiced by the late legendary Leonard Nimoy in the movie. I thought Galvatron was fantastic, I've got to admit. In the film, I thought he was more maniacal than Megatron, with a little bit of a loose screw. Ironic, considering it's a toy and it's a Transformer. But when you get to the cartoon, when you get to the season 3, which is I suppose the rebirth, as we talked about, and Galvatron in there, they completely changed the character, in my view, compared to the movie, because all of a sudden the voice didn't match the character, if you think about it, and they booked him as though he was a complete psychopath, which they kind of, if you go back to the wrestling personality, they took the character and multiplied it by a factor of 10. And it didn't work because he suddenly became one of the most, second to Ultra Magnus, most despised character in the franchise.
He became paranoid. The paranoia was played up to 10 times what it was need to be, and I think it was hampered by, from my point of view, you're absolutely right. They changed. I'm 99% sure the same guy who did Megatron came back to do Galvatron in the last 2 seasons.
Yeah,
and the animation changed as well, and also they didn't have Leonard Nimoy, because obviously they're not going to pay. They're not going to pay his wages, basically.
Yeah.
And there is a change, and I think for me it was more about, coming back again, links to wrestling. It was more about how it was written. It was written to be that he was this paranoid, no longer this maniacal monster that couldn't be stopped. He was vulnerable. They even had this thing where he had to go to counselling. They took him to counselling. Scourge took him to counselling at one point on his island, on his planet. Just stuff like that. And that's when you kind of go, this is
checking out.
Yeah, absolutely right. But you go back to that movie. The movie, and it's why it stands up, is because he was so evil. And combine that with Unicron, combine that with how maniacal Megatron was before that. The whole cast of characters, felt more wholesome. Ignoring Wheelie, which most people want to ignore Wheelie. That was that film really kind of stands to time. I actually watched that film about 6 months ago. I made my son and my wife sit and watch it, and there was mixed reviews, but the biggest thing that stuck with all of them was the soundtrack. Quality soundtrack, great music, and it and the animation was so much stronger than the cartoons.
You could tell because the budget they had for that film was tenfold what they had for the cartoon series. And they had to do something. This was part of a big reimagining by Hasbro to take selected brands and selected lines and really make them franchises. So G.I. Joe was going to be big screen. It didn't go big screen because of the box office of Transformers. My Little Pony had, I think, 2 films.
I think I went to the cinema to see the My Little Pony one with my sister. Went for her birthday, shortly after Transformers, because there was a My Little Pony film. I also, going back, and it's a bit of a plug for your last episode, I also went to see the He-Man She-Ra cartoon at the cinema, which you were talking about last week. Go check out the archive for that. But no, there was, at the time, we're probably talking mid to late 80s. Cartoons at the cinema was big business.
Yeah.
I don't know, it still is now, but this was kind of children's cartoons suddenly became this huge, big kind of phenomenon to get people in the door, get kids in the door. Let's get kids to the cinema. Simple as that.
I remember when I went, we talked about you going, I went to see it. My dad took me. And again, I was spoiler free, which you were back in the 80s. And I actually remember having a little bit of a tear when Prime died. You were really bought in and invested as a kid in that product. And my father looking at me going, oh God, because it was just like,
I was more, for me, don't know, Prime time was, I'm not going to sit and say, it didn't bother me. It was a huge shock, but I was more surprised at the overall body count throughout that film.
Within the first 10 minutes.
Yeah, early doors, you saw, Brawn, Ratchet, Prowl, Ironhide, all be destroyed. You saw Prowl, he had flames coming out of his mouth as he was shot.
I was about to say, it was quite, for what it was and for the market it was aiming for, it was quite graphically done. There was some brutal parts that you had, Ultra Magnus being pulled apart by the wreckers. Not the wreckers, the Junkions. They put him back together. You had that. You had Cup being ripped apart by a tentacle, by an octopus monster. The Quintesson, yeah.
It was an octopus sea monster at the time. But yeah, they had all that, and then you had the Quintessons feeding individuals to the Sharkticons. It was for Transformers, which it was a bit like the old Stormtroopers kind of mentality. They fire loads of lasers, hit very little. And Transformers cartoons were very similar. You got the odd kind of wound here or there, but it wasn't major. But they took the kind of like the volume button and just turned it right up,
I mean, you're talking about deaths. I mean, the beginning of the film where they're at Unicron and they're taking over the moon bases, and you see that bit with the conveyor belt and all the robots hanging on there, dropping into the acid, and just hearing their screams as they get, that for some kids that is haunting.
It's crazy. You think, especially I think maybe it's not the case today as much as it was, but kids back in my generation, they loved their toys. I think we're much more of a kind of disposable generation now. I say this with all due respect. I say this as being a father myself. My son, he's 16, nearly 17 now. Has gone through the phase of getting rid of the majority of his toys. In fact, all his toys are gone now. His bedroom's completely different. It's the kind of bedroom I quite like to have. But
his dad paid for it.
Yeah. But I remember going phase he was big into Lego, and I was like, and you remember him coming back to me? I don't want my Lego anymore. You can get rid of it. I'm like, no, you can't get rid of your Lego. So that's when he's played with since he was like a little kid, like a little kid. And he's like, no, I don't want it. So we've actually boxed it up and put it in the loft. But he said, just sell it. I'm not bothered.
You can't.
But back when I can't speak for myself, maybe you're the same. But I remember when I got to that age and my parents started getting rid of some of my toys, where it was Star Wars, Transformers, or Space Lego. For me, they were the three main things which kind of sat with me. I remember being absolutely heartbroken when they got given away to relatives in the main. That's where they kind of went to, and absolutely heartbroken over that.
For me, I was exactly the same, but it was He-Man and the Masters. I had hundreds of He-Man and like Castle Grayskull and Snake Mountain and the Wing Raider and all that type of thing. I had hundreds of it. And it went up in the loft as far as I knew. And then it got dumped. And it was just, when I found out, I was heartbroken. Because it was like, if I ever had a kid, and a boy, I'd love to have been able to have shared them.
Hey, very soon, mate. These toys are for all both generations.
They are. And actually, I've got all of the Transformers and all of He-Man. And at some point, I will sit Bella down and she will watch something. But I'll just make sure Becky's not around before that.
I just think the difference is nowadays, and I try. I'll be interested to see what she kind of says, but I don't think kids were interested in it.
Do you know what?
We're so used to having something more electronic, something more kind of computer generated, and the quality. And it does. And listen, I love Transformers, and I've watched some old He-Man stuff on YouTube and that kind of stuff as well. I was never into He-Man much. I used to watch it when it was on, and same with G.I. Joe. Mask is another great one. All that kind of stuff. Centurions and Jason the Wheeled Warriors, all that kind of stuff is kind of classic retro stuff, which we class as retro now. I loved it. And I would probably still sit and watch it now. But in all honesty, it doesn't age well. And you start going,
I'll give you an example. Yeah, I'll give you an example. One of my favorite Christmas films growing up, and this is real off a tangent, was Yogi Bear's First Christmas. Right? I used to, when I was a kid, when I was a real young kid, and it was all about Yogi got woken up from hibernation and him and Boo Boo and all the gang, and they went to this lodge. And it's only 90 minutes, but it was a great cartoon. And I got it, and I sat with Bella and put it on TV. And within about 2 minutes,
I do apologise.
That's all right. Within about 2 minutes of putting the video on, she was like, "No, Daddy, don't want to watch it, Daddy." And I'm like, "Please watch it. It's a classic." But she doesn't want to watch it because of the animation. And it's, we now sit there and watch Postman Pat Special Delivery Service or Rah Rah or something like that.
One of the things I noticed when I say my son Josh was a lot younger was also the length. And maybe this is the case now. The length of what we used to watch, would go on in some cases an hour, but in the main kind of 30 to 40 minutes. Kids' TV programs nowadays seem to be much more quicker. And I think they're used to that kind of short payoff. Because we are a YouTube, generation, aren't we? We're scrolling up and down, going to watch it. And I'm the same, equally now. If I see a video on Facebook or on YouTube or whatever, I'll watch it. But if an ad jumps in or it's more than 10 minutes and I'm not interested, I'm on to the next one. And I think we're not used to sitting there and looking for these long story arcs now, which we used to get in some of our cartoons, a lot of our cartoons, to be fair. A lot of the cartoons you look back. Transformers is a good example. I think G.I. Joe is pretty good. I think actually, again, you mentioned it last week. I think He-Man was good. They had story arcs that would carry on, throughout the season. And might be very small stuff, but it'll be stuff that they would call back to. And nowadays, we aren't. I just don't think we're kind of. Or at least our children aren't set up for
No,
it.
and that's a shame, but that comes down to society and the way the kids have grown up and what they're watching now. Right, let's. We're 45 minutes into the episode. I think it's been a cracking discussion so far, but let's look at the movie. So let's talk about the Transformers movie. Iconic, I think, not only for the deaths of the characters and the introductions, but for the one line, the one word from Spike.
And it depends which version you've got, whether it's
depends which version you watch, but it's the second most controversial moment in the film, second only to Optimus Prime dying, was profanity being used on a Transformers cartoon.
Which again, I think kind of makes you for me, goes, well, that's how big a moment it was. They tried to blow up Unicron. They thought they hadn't. Ironically enough, I think I'm 99% sure. I'm happy to be fact checked, but he actually swears in conversation to Bumblebee.
Yes, he does.
Who for me was this character that I hated as a kid because he was so goody two shoes, and Spike swearing him. I almost wanted Bumblebee to slap him, say, "No, you can't speak like that. Think of the children," or something like that. But
that would be hilarious.
Again, the version I saw at the cinema, that bit wasn't there. It wasn't until, God, it must have been about 10 years ago that I actually realised there was that one line in it. Right.
They released it on the.
Quick, so you've got to really listen to it.
It's a bit like Data in Star Trek Generations, where he does the Enterprise crashes and he's got the emotion chip in. It came out, I think, in the limited edition Blu-ray release, which they did the steel tin for like the anniversary, and that was one of the special features. Was that edit was in that film. People make a big deal about it. For kids at the time, it wasn't in there. You wouldn't have known it. I think it just appeals to the adults. It's just that extra little bit of realism.
I think also, and again, the word they use is 4 letters and began with S. Pretty straightforward. You can probably guess what it is. Yeah. So I won't swear on your podcast. But the back then, as a kid, and again, I can only speak for myself, but hopefully you'll agree, there is no way in the world you'd let your parents catch you using that word.
Oh, God, no.
In the world. I think that's why, from an adult point, you realise that was in there. You're like, oh my God, they got away with that. That was actually released in some. I think in some places in America, they got away with actually playing that. Yeah. I would have had my backside tanned and probably been banned to my room for months at a time if my dad or mum caught me using that word back at that age.
I remember once I used it. Not really, knowing what it meant. You just knew it was you were just rebelling. You were being a bit of a bad guy. And I said it, and I don't condone being smacked, but I remember my mother really did lay me out with one. And I never did it again as a kid. I do now all the time, but as a kid, never again.
On a similar note, these things that kids do, and I did, so I'm happy to say it's stupid. I remember riding my bike past my neighbour's house, and my neighbour had a daughter, same age as me, went to school with her and everything. And she waved me, the mother waved me, as she did, because we knew each other. And instead of waving back, I stuck 2 fingers up at her. I have no idea why. To this day, I cannot tell you what possessed me to stick 2 fingers up at this woman. She'd never done anything wrong to me or anything like that. I then remember her oldest son, who was like, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 years older than me, coming to my house and asking to speak to my mum and dad. And mum and dad had friends around the time. It was like family was around, and he told her what they did. And my backside, I could not sit down for over a week. I was like, and quite rightly, because there was no need for it. Not that I'm advocating violence towards children, but at the time that was the norm, and that was what my punishment was. And I had to go around and apologise to her, quite rightly too. But just saying, my point was, it's silly that things that kids do, and you don't even think about it. And if I had heard that word used in Transformers, I would have probably been like, I don't know if I would have even known what it meant at the time.
No, but you would have known. Maybe it was. You would have heard the gasps in the audience, I think, and maybe you would have gone, "Oh, that's." It was kind of like printing money for you to kind of go around saying it, wouldn't it? You kind of think, "Wow, Spike can say it, but it's damn okay for me."
I think at school you'd have been like, "Oh, look, I'm hard. I'm going to say, essay, whatever."
Then by the ear to the principal's office, and
I never saw any of that happen at my school. I saw a teacher throw a lump of chalk at a kid across the room.
Oh wow!
But I never had the old kind of, not to me, or never saw the old kind of, that kind of.
I remember one time at one of the middle schools, and I cannot remember to the life of me what happened, but I can just remember the teacher coming down, grabbing the kid by the ear and just dragging him to the headmaster's office. And we never saw him again for the rest of the day. And I remember all of us, we were just sat in the group going, oh, okay.
That is scary. I mean, that back then was scary. Wind. That back there is absolutely one of the scary things you had as a kid. I'm completely off tangent here, but we were generally afraid of parents, policemen, teachers, anyone in authority. You would not be rude to, or at least I wouldn't be anyway, because I was scared of the repercussions from that. And so going back then, that's why I think there was this big thing about removing that swear word from Transformers, because just which wasn't done. Now it's on BBC One, ITV, Channel 5, not even time.
It's like it's been downgraded now from a swear word just to a normal everyday.
I think there are so many words like that though.
Yeah,
it's possibly a different time, but that the lexicon has changed so much. What you can get away with saying in public into people nowadays.
I wouldn't want to be a kid now. In all honesty, I wouldn't want to be a kid.
I mean, you're going to come across this. I mean, because obviously now Bella's talking, and as she gets older, you're going to have that conversation at some point about what is acceptable and what isn't. And it's hard. When I hear my son swear, sometimes I'm like, hang on a minute. But then I think, do you know what? I've got a potty mouth myself, being a bit of a hypocrite.
I tell you what, it's the hardest thing for Becky and I to sit there and control it. We have to try and really, especially when she's done something or something's happened, and the normal reaction is to go, for the love of, I smacked I was in the garage the other day, and I moved something, and the ladder fell off the roof and smacked me on the head. Right?
Ow.
Yeah. So your normal reaction would be, beep. But I remember Bella was just outside the door, so I had to go, ow, ouchie, ouchie.
I can't. I'm known within my family, especially in my head. If I bang my head on anything, I use a word which is a lot worse, a hell of a lot worse than what Spike used in Transformers. I'm a nightmare for it, and I just can't stop myself. You bang my head.
I've been life shows with you.
It's just the worst thing you can do to me. Worst thing you can do to me.
We're getting close to the hour, so we're going to start to do a little bit more, and then we're going to wrap it up. Let's talk about the memory of the film. Where does it stand now in the test of time? How often do you go back to it? Do you still rate it up there as one of the best, or is it?
Good. I mean, yeah. I mean, I hate those kind of questions like what's your favorite films and that kind of stuff. If I had to, it is probably in the list and one of my top probably 3 or 4 favorites. The way I can demonstrate that is we don't have any DVDs in our house now, or very few. There's hardly any DVDs at all now. What I have got is the Transformers movie DVD, season 1 and and all the seasons are still on DVD. Even though I know you can watch them online, but I've still got them. They're on my shelf just because they're there. I haven't watched it for a while. If I do want to watch any of them, I'll go online and watch them because a lot of them are on YouTube. There's a website you can go to where you can watch them. I'll do it there. I like watching some of the clips. So you get these clips posted on Facebook of some of the best bits from the movie. You get the soundtrack and all that kind of stuff. So that, I'll watch it. And I will still watch it. Probably this week I've watched at least one. So it's something that just sticks with me. And I don't know why. It's nostalgia. It's retro, excuse the pun, and it's just fun. It takes you back to some times when times are simple, and you can just kind of get into it. I love all these new programs that come out, and you've got these kind of detailed stuff you've got to think about. With something like that, you can just pick it up, you can sit and watch it. You understand the concept of good and evil. Yeah. It is as straightforward as that.
It's great. I'm exactly the same with you. And it's been, the last 3 weeks doing the show and doing different topics have been great. But this one I've really enjoyed. Dan, as always, it has been a pleasure to speak to you Chew the Fat for nearly an hour. I've got plenty of fat to chew.
I wasn't going to say nothing, my friend. Nothing at all.
I know you weren't. That's why I get it in there before you. I've also got more hair than you. It's been a privilege. It's been an absolute pleasure to do it. All the best for the MC and getting back on the road again. And if you are near a show near Dan, go and see him. If people want to keep up with you on social, how can they do it? Because you're not on Twitter, are you?
No, not officially. No, so the best place to get hold of me, and I'm getting behind the times, but is on my Facebook page, which is my MC page, and it's at Daniel Barnsdall, which is BARNSDALLMC. At Daniel Barnsdall MC. You can find me there, and all my upcoming shows are there, videos, photos are there. I gotta try and get on Twitter and sort Instagram out properly, and what else is there? Snapchat, maybe? I don't know. Well, it's not something I really need.
There's Twitch. There's TikTok. Could do some TikToks.
I've started playing a bit of Call of Duty online. Quite a bit. It's kind of like my thing to do. I just need to when I get 10 minutes downtime, and I followed a couple of people who stream it, and I watch them, and I'm like, oh, this could be kind of fun to do. And I think, no, actually, do you know what? I'm god awful.
Don't. Opens you up to so much bullying. Don't do it.
Do you know what? That kind of stuff doesn't bother me. Say what you like. I don't care. I generally don't care. I've had enough said to me over the years. I just think it's just funny. I think these people have got enough time to sit and watch my stuff and come up with something. Fair play. At least they're watching it.
Yeah, absolutely. Dan, it's been a pleasure. Stay on the line for me for just a second. That's it for this week, talking all things Transformers. We've hit almost the hour mark again. So much for keeping these shows short and sweet, huh? But I hope you have enjoyed the conversation. Next week, not only do we have From the Vault, so we've got Master Universe Chronicles, we've got some TSC interviews. I love it. I love it, Dan, when a podcast comes together, because you know what that means? I'm doing the A-Team.
That must be the A-Team.
That's the A-Team. I'm looking at the pilot next week.
Oh, wow. Awesome. I can't remember if I ever saw the pilot. I used to watch it. I remember watching it. They all kind of blurred into one. I do remember one distinct. Yeah, and I'm sure you'll cover this next week, but there was only one episode where they actually did blood.
Yes.
And it was fake blood. In the storyline, it was fake blood because they had Murdoch wear a blood pack.
Yes.
And I remember that being a big thing at some point. Was the actual pilot where they broke out of prison originally? No, it's not. Okay.
The pilot is known for one thing: a completely different Templeton Peck.
Really? That's interesting.
Dirk Benedict didn't sign on until the second episode, because the pilot was the one they were shopping around to the networks. Yeah. The screen test came back and they hated the guy who played Face. So he got replaced by Dirk Benedict, who had come straight off Battlestar Galactica.
He was on Battlestar Galactica, because I think there was some crossover at one point as well, I believe.
Yeah, because if you watch the intro, just watch the intro on YouTube.
Yes, he walks past Asylum walks past him. Yeah, he does that kind of classic double take, which I thought, little nod. I like stuff like that. You get these little kind of nods back to it. That should be an interesting show to check out, Andy. The A-Team are, again, very retro, very classic. Not too sure how well it's going to age. But,
well, Dan, did you know, I'm going to add something here. Did you know that if you listen to this show on Spotify, you can leave a voicemail?
Wow, can you? That's clever.
So if you want to share your opinions, or anybody out there wants to share their thoughts on the A-Team or any of the topics that we've covered here on Retro Chat so far, go to Spotify, listen to an episode and click on the voicemail link. It will then take you. You can leave a voicemail and I will play them, as long as they're clean, on the show next week.
Don't do a Spike from Transformers.
Please don't. And on that note, Dan, been a pleasure. We will see you all next week. Until then, take care. And we'll be back with more From the Vault later on in the week and the A-Team next week. Until then, signing off.